Okay, good afternoon in Nigeria here and good morning in the United States of America. This is Savannah Center hosting this session of the UN 75 program, which has to do with community peace as foundation for security. The program has been laid out. I am the moderator for this session. The program will run thus. We will invite the host of this program, the Executive Director of Savannah Center, to make a very short welcome speech. Thereafter, we will invite the first speaker to deliver his paper. The second speaker will also do the same thing. And after that, we'll refer to participants to make general comments, questions, and answer session. And thereafter, we will wrap up with a summary of all what have been said from the first paper and second paper, and for the general comments from the participants. And then we'll round up the session by the host closing the session. At the end of the day, the report will be compiled and sent across to you over there. So if there are any observations on this program as laid out, we would like to receive your feedback. Thank you very much. Are you there? Can you hear us?
We can hear you. Everything's all good.
You can't hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, you can. Okay. So, may I quickly then ask the Executive Director of Savannah Center, who is the host of this session, to kindly deliver his short welcome address.
Thank you very much. Good morning, compatriots in the US and other parts of the world. Good afternoon to those in Africa and where it is afternoon. My own is just to give you a simple, short welcome remarks. Of course, I'm very delighted to welcome you all to this community-driven session, being one of the series of sessions organized by the UN 75 Global Conference, Global Governance Forum, dealing with a variety of issues of regional and global concerns, which will ultimately lead us to fashion out the future we want and the UN we need, as we commemorate the 75 years of existence of the United Nations organization. Indeed, the next 75 years of the United Nations will witness remarkable fundamental changes in the organization in view of the efforts galvanized so far by the civil society organizations towards making the United Nations better. Let me also join colleagues in thanking the Stilton Center for bringing about this entire all-encompassing and innovative global event, which seeks to advocate and propagate a more inclusive and effective United Nations in the next 75 years. A United Nations which in its efforts at the realization of its goal of achieving peace, sustainable development, human rights, and stable climate will avail itself of the tremendous amount of human and material capabilities, innovative ideas and networks provided by not only the state actors, but in particular by the non-state actors, the civil society organizations. I have been following the robust discussions and consultations on the platform of the forum with keen interest, and I must congratulate all the hosts, speakers, and participants for the various sessions. So far, it is a success story. My special thanks go to Dr. Richard Ponzo and his team at the Student Center for their tireless efforts and effective leadership in driving the process. Today, the Savannah Center for Diplomacy, Democracy and Development is hosting a community-driven session under the topic Community Peace as a Foundation of Security. The two speakers, Professor Oshita, who is the Executive Director of Ubuntu Center for Africa Peace Building and Development, and Colonel Ademola Lawal, retired, who is the Head of Research Department of the Savannah Center for Diplomacy, Democracy and Development. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to give their citations, but this can be accessed on the forum's website. On this note, I urge you all to listen carefully and contribute liberally. I wish us pleasant interactive session and happy UN 75. God bless.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Without much ado and to save time, I just want to go straight to the first paper to be delivered by Professor Oshita, who is the Executive Director of Ubuntu Center for African Peace Building and Development here in Nigeria. He's going to talk on the issue of community peace as foundation for security. Prof, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good day all over the world. This session on community peace as foundation for security is actually very, very central to how we think the UN of the future post-75 should function. Of many years, that community peace is indeed the foundation for security. And that means employing peace, that is cultivating peace and security bottom top or bottom up rather than top down. In this presentation, we have posed a number of questions that we are responding to in the main paper. I will not go through the questions for lack of time. So I'll just go into trying to conceptualize the keywords in the topic, namely community, peace, and security. But before I do that, I want to bring to the fore a very catchy statement that I found in the concept note that was developed by the Savannah Center, from where I drew my inspiration for discussing this topic. And it reads, global security challenges can be resolved by addressing community governance. When each community, both rural and urban, is able to, and I add, self-govern, security challenges shall abate. I stop it there. Now, what is community peace? We can have a society without communities. Communities means having some relationship. Across the world, we have cities, we have towns, but we may not have communities because the people do not live, though they live in close proximity, do not relate in a way that would meet the requirements for a community. And I say this because the New Webster's Dictionary of the English Language defines community as, and I quote, a body of people living near one another and in social relationship. So you could have people living near each other. If they do not have social relationship, there cannot be a community. And we are saying that in every context, a community is a unit where people do not only socialize, do not only have a relationship, but have an understanding. From that understanding, they can plan peace building, and they can also, meet their security needs. Now, by community peace, we refer to the state of relative harmony among people of specific locale. They must be in a certain, place, not just everywhere. And the other major term in this topic is security. I take it that the notion of peace is one which all of us understand. Living cordially, together. Now, security is generally about freedom from danger or anxiety regarding all aspects of human existence. So, security is fundamental. Now, if we look at the state of how human society evolved from the state of nature, you will recall that security was the key driver of the evolution of civil society. And so, if you have a social unit that is insecure, then of course it means that there is no peace in that social unit. And that's why we're saying that a precondition for security is peace, and peace in the community. Now, why the UN is so important in this is that, yes, we all recognize that the UN is a multilateral, agency, and it is the apex, that is the highest of all multilateral agencies. Now, if the UN as coordinator of state affairs, that is member states of the UN, is not able to get to where real people, the community is, then of course it will just be, relating with states, and communities will continue, to be in a state of anarchy. And of course, we know that if communities are insecure, in a state of anarchy, then the state itself will now be, under serious threat. That is important. Now, part of what we have done in this presentation is to say that the UN is the guarantor of peace and democracy. And that is true, because in its interaction with member states, the UN insists that member states ensure that there is peace in their territory. But that is the much the UN does, not forgetting the fact that through its various specialized agencies like the UNDP and others, it carries out some programs in communities. But what we are saying is that if the state itself does not buy into the idea of communities being peaceful, then communities will not be peaceful. And in the long term, the state itself will become endangered. Now, while democracy is anchored on the idea of power to the people, we are all aware that in many states across the world, particularly in Africa, I dare say, power is not with the people. Power is with strong men who are politicians. And so, which means that the communities where the people are, who should have the power under democracy, are already being, sidelined in the context of governance. And that is very important. So part of what we will expect the UN to do in the years ahead is to reinvent itself in a way that it will not only relate to the states, but it will encourage the states to see communities as the critical units for the state to exist, and to be peaceful. I give the examples that we have in Nigeria, for instance, or let me say Mali, where it is hottest. The communities have disowned the governance there, And as a result of that, some people have decided to take over power. And there is a state of negotiation going on. But the point is that if the communities were carried along, and this is very important, in our environment we talk about communities being carried along. If communities were carried along, of course, it would be difficult, for any group of persons, to want to disturb the peace. Now, the other point we would like to make is that with regards to peace and security, national constitutions all over the world emphasize the importance of peace and security, and that is always contained in the ground norm, which is the constitution of the country. In our own country, in Nigeria, we have the 1999 constitution in chapter 2, section 14, subsection B, and to some extent, section C. It emphasizes that the welfare, security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. So, and that again goes to underscore the point I made earlier about transitioning from the state of nature to civil society, as we find in all the social contract theories that we know, talk about peace and security as the critical point why the evolution from state of nature to civil society took place. And so if we are in a civil society and then there is no peace, there is no security, then it means that the reason for emergence into civil society has been defeated. And that's why we are saying that looking at the efforts of the UN in peace and security across the world, and in Africa in particular, we see a number of criticisms. And the most challenging criticisms for UN peacekeeping in Africa is the one that says that the interventions do not reckon with the grassroots. And so the interventions come with prepared, framework that has worked elsewhere, not taking into consideration the context in specific countries, that the intervention is taking place. And let me say this: yes, we have universals of humanity, but we also have peculiarities and context, of different places. So there can't be a one-size-fits-all. And I think that going forward, the UN will look at the formula for intervention, so that what works in one place does not automatically become, a reference point that will now be exported to another location. There are peculiarities. There are dynamics that are different from what will have happened elsewhere. For us in Africa, I think the future UN, post-UN 75, will do well, to help us reinforce the position of communities, because Africa has always been communal. Africa has always been communal, and so the concept of individualism, which is, primary in the way we run democracy today, is a bit strange, to Africa. That's why we have the notion of Ubuntu. And in the presentation, we have taken time to analyze what Ubuntu means, because Ubuntu is about connectivity, being together, caring for one another, empathy, such that we will not have the kind of tension that we have in typical individualistic societies. Now, in Africa, as a result of Ubuntu, we do not have private backyards. And I'm making this reference, because of the struggle of environmentalists that talk about NIMBY, the NIMBY principle of not in my backyard. In typical African environment, we had always known not in our backyard, because we didn't have fences, and one home crosses into another home, and everything was done, in a circle, in a central place, across many buildings, many settlements. So not in our backyard was there before, to ensure environmental sanctity. Before we had not in my backyard. Yeah. So In the presentation, we have highlighted a lot about Ubuntu, and we believe that the UN can leverage mutual lessons from other international and regional organizations. For example, ECOWAS. ECOWAS decided in 2008 to begin to talk about an ECOWAS not of states, but ECOWAS of the people.
Yes, they say it should be more interactive and you should limit your own presentation.
Okay.
That can be interactive.
Okay, let me just,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so just to respond to this information, the point I'm trying to make here is that ECOWAS is realizing that being state-centric is becoming problematic and they are losing the followership of the people. And so in 2008, the ECOWAS conflict prevention framework was designed so that ECOWAS will now transit from ECOWAS of states to ECOWAS of the people. We believe that the UN can use this model, by engaging with other international and regional organizations to reinvent the strategy for engaging with the people so that governance will be more inclusive and more grassroots oriented.
Thank you very much, Professor Shita. Over to you, participants. You've heard the presentation, and I'm sure there are a lot of comments and questions that may arise from the topic. Over to you, New York, and other participants who may want to have a contribution to this topic. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So we're going to do something a little bit special for this session. We're going to bring you on as a dialogue format. So for those of you that have any comments or questions, I'm actually going to go ahead and bring you on screen if you're okay with that. So if you want to be brought on screen, put it on the chat and we can have a dialogue together about the issues.
Okay, if I heard you well, you are saying that there are contributions. Okay, so let's have contributions from participants, please. Are there contributions from other participants, please?
We do have our first contribution. I'm going to go ahead and promote you to a panelist, and then you can be speaking. It's just 1 minute, and he'll join us.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, perfect. You can go ahead and turn on your video as well.
Yes. Hello? Thank you for your time and your presentation, Professor. I suppose I will wait until perhaps there are other participants who would like to participate as well.
Why don't we go ahead and get started and ask people want to engage. We'll go ahead and admit them as well.
Great, so earlier you were discussing again this idea of community and how community needs to be the foundation of peace and security. My question to that is, sir, as someone who is from Myanmar, historically we have had quite a lot of conflict in my country, particularly ethnic conflict as well. So I'm interested in this idea of redistribution, how do we redistribute power back into communities rather than individuals? Because historically, from what I've seen of countries who have been affected by conflict and violence, we are seeing that it is also in large due part because individuals are the ones who are holding the power. Big name dictators are the ones at the forefront of these conversations of conflict resolution. So how do we go about redistributing power back to communities rather than individuals, particularly with youth and women, as we think about how leaders in the global community are mostly men who are not from the youth category? Thank you.
Okay. Can I respond to one at a time? Do we take one at a time? Yeah. Yeah. I'll then respond to this. Okay? Yeah. Now, the question is, how do we redistribute power to the people from powerful individuals who are holding power hostage? Yeah. Now, when you look at the way society is moving, leaders, the powerful leaders who are holding power hostage, strong men in Africa, we call them, they are interested in ensuring that we do not have civic communities. We do not have civic, consciousness among the people. Instead, they use mobilizers such as ethnicity, religion, and so they give us the idea that we are cultural people. So we are either of this ethnic group or that religion. So if we can, if the people understand that that is a simple technique for dividing and ruling and exploiting and keeping them perpetually, below, living, how human beings should live, then communities will organize better and tell the leaders the next time they come to ask for their vote to say, no, we know what we want. You don't give us what you want to give us. And you are right when you talk about youth and women being, sidelined. In spite of 1325, the UN resolution 1325, we find in many countries that women are still not able to be on the table for any serious conversation regarding peace and war. Yet, when there is war, the women suffer the most. So the issue is that the civic society, the civic community must begin to take its own, ownership of how to move forward. And that's why we are saying that if the UN, of the future enables states to know that, yes, we are a multilateral institution and we interact mainly with states. But if states do not take care of communities, state itself will go into extinction. As you can see in leaderless, conflicts in different parts of the place, of the world. In Mali, the people were everywhere. There was no leader that you can say is leading them in the violence. And if this happens, the leader, whoever he is, will also lose his own position. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there any more contributors before we go into the second paper?
So we do have one more comment, and I'm going to go ahead and read it aloud because we're having some unstable connectivity. So it would be really good if you guys could respond to this. Putting in place early warning systems to continuously monitor root causes of conflict and conflict dynamics. In short term, in my opinion, organizing community dialogues, empowering youth and women, providing trainings to national defense forces, in the long term, building peace through development. So maybe we could dive into the domains of interlinkages between peace and development. This is from Thomas Kroll.
That is a very important question, very, very important. It's central because the idea of community dialogue, would conscientize the people, will create awareness, and the people will know their rights the more. And that's why we say in peace building that participation and ownership at the conception level, when the ideas are starting, the people must be involved. They know what they need so that they can make their choices. Now, it is important, I agree with you, that community dialogues are very, very central. And so from community dialogue, people begin to see what development options they will take. And so that way, they will take control of their lives to say these are our priorities. What we have today, because states have become, too domineering, is that a state, agency goes to a community and puts an infrastructure which the people didn't need. If they were asked, if they participated in the process of identifying what their priorities would be, they will not pick such an infrastructure. They will prioritize. But what we see is that the people are being sidelined, and so they are not able to take ownership of their development options. And so I agree with you that community dialogues are important because they conscientize the people and they also make the people take ownership. And that's why we talk about inclusiveness. If there is no inclusiveness, then people are already on the margins and they are left, where they can now become, subjects of alienation. And when they are alienated, of course, that eventually that is another driver, for violent conflict.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. In view of time constraints, and there will be room for more comments and question and answer session, I would want us to move straight into the second paper, which has to do with the same community peace and foundation for security, but from a different perspective. This time around, the perspective is more about the military engagement and how the paradigm has shifted. The United Nations, over 75 years, have been committed to interstate warfare, where states engage in warfare. And after the Cold War, we found the paradigm has shifted. And what has shifted? What has shifted is that states no longer wage war among themselves and between themselves, but these now wars are fought within the people, within communities. And that has brought to effect what is now referred to as insurgency. So most countries internally face insurgency, and that's the new paradigm of warfare that is going on. So how can the United Nations shift from its structure and focus on interstate warfare to war among the people, war that's located within the people, that is not necessarily interstate? As we all know, after the Cold War, much of the wars that have been raging on across the globe has been within communities. We talk of Afghanistan, we talk about Iraq, we talk of Nigeria, Mali, name it. Most of the conflict that happens now is internal. So how does the United Nations confront this question of conflict that goes on within the people? And that's the issue that we should look forward to moving forward in the structure of the United Nations. Now, the nature of insurgency itself is that within the people, it rises and the insurgents actually begin to battle with the hearts and minds of the people. So government itself is battling with conflict within the people in communities, whereas government is not capable to actually govern up to the grassroots level. Therefore, the need for non-state actors to actually participate in this question of peace and security has become crucial. Therefore, communities should begin to assert themselves in terms of structure as a foundation for developing global security. And what we are saying here is that governments, state governments alone cannot wage war against insurgency, because wars are within communities and therefore communities are best in position to counter warfare and conflict that happen within their community. That being the case, we find that the only way that the UN can reform itself is by going down to recognize structures within community that can be resilient, that can be self-governing in order to combat insurgency, as well as conflict management that will bring about peace within their own communities. So you need that kind of structure that the United Nations can begin to recognize and develop and promote in order for security to take place at the community level. And once that is done, it can be networked across the globe. Therefore, you have a handshake across the whole globe with communities involved in their own structures governing themselves locally. And we find that the United Nations Development Program has actually some approach to this question of taking security and peace to the grassroots level. And if you look at their definition, that's the United Nations Development Program, they have set about 7 pillars, measurable pillars for security. And they talk about personal security. Personal security means guarding against theft, rape, name it, all those criminalities that affect directly the person. And this can be guarded within the community itself. You should be able to know those who perpetrate these things within the community. As we all know, police is not everywhere. And therefore, you need community policing in order to be able to check this personal safety, personal security that is required as a pillar of global security. The second aspect that the United Nations Development Program has actually articulated is political security. Again, it is within the community that you can have a governance that will enable everybody have a say, inclusiveness. Like the earlier speaker has mentioned, the need for inclusiveness happens only at the community level. When you know each other, you'll be able to guard against and promote and protect your interests. And of course, we talk about economic security. The distribution of natural resources happen at the community level. And you need a great and good community governance in order for you to be able to monitor the economic well-being of your people. The economic well-being is located within the community. And for example, when we talk about natural resources and its distribution, we talk about rivers, water distribution, farmland distribution, pastoral distribution. All these things take place within communities. The land belongs to the community, they are governed by the community, and therefore you need strong governance at that community level to be able to manage and control the conflict and confrontations that may arise as a result of the enforcement and jostling of citizens within the community trying to elevate themselves in terms of economic empowerment. And of course, you have food security, you have environmental security, where you begin to manage the environment through the community governance. And therefore, once you have such a structure, you'll be able to manage all these facets of security that brings about conflict. And you'll be able to manage them locally, knowing yourself, knowing the key players. And so you bring in non-state actors very strongly in developing systems and structures within the community that can actually promote governance at that level. And like the earlier speaker said, it is actually a question of how do you structure communities to govern themselves? What kind of structure do you really require? Like we all know, and like you said, you have communities that are already traditional and cultural, and they have their system. If you enforce and reinforce their systems, you will be able to overcome so many of the challenges that state governments are unable to achieve. You hand that over to them, conflict management in the local level, using their local mechanism will have a long way in solving a lot of these problems. However, it has challenges. Some of the challenges are that these traditional norms and cultures may not cut across settlers, people who have come to join the community. And so let us agree that certainly in trying to structure community governance, we are going to run into issues of indigenous settler questions. These are some of the issues that need to be resolved. And in resolving that, all it has to do is that when you want to establish community governance, you begin to put up structures that will embrace all the strata of the community. So you bring the traditional people, you bring women and youth, you bring professionals like teachers. All those people who work within the community can be brought together in a committee or a council that will begin to resolve their problems, from time to time in a routine manner. And I dare say that this kind of practice has been done by Savannah Center in the northeast of Nigeria, where community-based governance modeling have been set up and have worked very, very well. And the structure was very simple. All the strata of the society within the local communities are brought together in a committee, and from time to time, they deliberate on security challenges facing their community and profess solutions and link up with government. So what role can state government then do if we are saying that communities should be able to govern themselves in terms of peace and security? What it requires, therefore, is for state governments to recognize the need for communities to self-govern, recognize the need for conflict management, and of course, the ability to provide local security using their local resources to be able to nip in the bud whatever is required. And that's why when you talk of early warning mechanism for conflict management, it rests and first and foremost from the communities. Where the communities are not able to provide these early warning mechanisms, you run into problems. And so state government should begin to recognize the need for early warning mechanism using this kind of community-based arrangement. And for the United Nations, what way forward must the United Nations adopt? And I believe that United Nations can begin to look at the UNDP program and ensure that communities are properly structured and continue to hold dialogue and manage their own affairs in terms of conflict management, and put them together in a global way, in a way that perhaps annually there can be annual conference of community governance structures where non-stakeholders are involved, women and youth are involved, to exchange ideas, to promote ideas, and to be able to chart the way forward under the auspices of the United Nations Secretary General in a huge annual conference that will begin to develop and evolve new ways of addressing peace and security based on community foundation. That's what I think we should be looking at. And I want to stop here for further comments. Thank you very much.
So we actually have an interesting comment if you would like to respond. This is from the Honorable Muhammad Umaru Bago, Chairman, House Committee on Cooperation, Integration in Africa, National Assembly, Abuja, Nigeria. He says, for sustainable peace and development, good governance, as well as economic empowerment, devolution of power to communities is not negotiable. He would like to add, the basic challenge is organization and assembly at community levels, i.e. leadership as well as accountability. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, this is a very good one, coming from a member of the National Assembly, which shows that the buy-in is already here, and the UN can be sure that if the National Assembly member is in support of, is saying that economic empowerment is non-negotiable, then it means that even legislators recognize the fact that the communities need to be empowered. The communities need to be given the chance, to fulfill their full, potentials as community members in the context of the state. And so this means that communities, can be made stronger, because if communities are empowered, they have a voice. If they are not empowered, they don't have a voice. And so they continue to be, in a state of impoverishment. And so this is it's gladdening to hear this.
Yes, I think so. And most importantly, coming from the legislature of Nigeria, we also want him to know that there are some other mechanisms like social auditing that the community can engage in. Social auditing is a new concept, not quite new, but new in this country and many other parts of African countries, which we hope that legislatures of Africa can begin to develop social auditing. Social auditing simply means that if you want to develop a community, involve the community. Let the community be account for it. You should be accountable to the communities in this kind of development. And this, the only way, or one of the ways, a major way you can do it, is by social auditing, a structure that will enable the community hold meetings and begin to monitor and evaluate the projects and programs that you are put in place in those communities. And so it needs community ownership, but also needs legislature. You need the legislature to enact social auditing in order for it to be legitimate.
And next, I think we're going to have another panelist that wants to ask us a question. So whenever you're ready, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I'm wondering if you are referring to me.
Yes, that would be great.
Yes, thank you so much, Honorable Sirs, for your comments. Especially these past two papers have been quite enlightening when I think of my own country's situation. But I think the big theme that is arising, in my view, from both of your presentations is this idea of the need of trust building, not only from the government to community, but also community to community as well. Attempting to find the common ground, I think, will be quite, as you were saying earlier, one of the challenges of structuring community governance. How do we begin to go about the process of rebuilding or building trust among our diverse communities to ensure that everyone's voice is at the table, but that they trust their voice will be at the table? That would be my follow-up question.
Thank you very much. In the second presentation, we talked about community governance, and the example was cited our Savannah Center's program in the northeast of Nigeria, where all the strata of the community, traditional rulers, teachers, nurses, and all those people involved, herders, farmers, are brought together periodically, maybe weekly or whatever, but as designed by the community, to constantly meet to evaluate the security situation of their community and begin to manage it through conflict management. Before even government intervenes, the community themselves must have sat down to be able to build the kind of trust we are talking about, because through constant meeting, when there is a forum for complaints and forum for discussion within the community, it also begins to build trust among the people. People are able to open up among themselves. Women are in it, youth are in it, all strata of the society are in it, artisans are in it. And once you have that kind of forum for discussion and adjudication of conflict, it builds trust and it can help government in a non-state actor kind of action. Before you even begin to call the police and security agencies, the communities themselves must have been able to do a lot of some. For example, if you have conflict of opening the market, the local market, for example, it simply goes to that group of people who will begin to look at the various challenges and the various conflicts relating to opening a local market, and they'll be able to sort those problems out, within their own conflict management mechanism. And by that, trust is built, and in fact, the police themselves will have confidence that the community is actually self-governing. And I think these are some of the ways that can be done.
Yes, maybe I'll just add that, as I said in my presentation, if we look at the history of Africa and the Ubuntu governance principle, you'll see that actually Africa never lost her common ground among her people until individualism came. Because everything was communal, and until I grew up as a teenager, I knew that in my community every adult woman was mother to me, and every adult man was father to me. But we've lost that because of individualism. You dare not discipline somebody else's child, you know. But that in the past, every adult person had a responsibility to discipline a child, whoever child that was. But you see, we are now in search of common ground because we have lost it to, you know, opening up, you know, globalizing, becoming individualistic rather than communal. And we are thinking that we can find some things that are good or that were good in the African system, and you know the UN can encourage its agencies to buy back these things so that we can, you know, handle them the way that they will fit the 21st century. Because the kind of conflict we have today, where individual rights surpasses the right of the community, then you know that is a challenge. In traditional African system, you know, community rights, you know, have are supreme, you know, and everybody buys into community rights. And so the tendency for, you know, for us to lose the common ground, you know, was very, very minimal. And it was a communal way of dealing with, you know, dissension and violent conflict due to individual whims and caprices. But today, here is where we are. We think that there is something good in Ubuntu, which is traditional African way of looking at humanity as inclusive, as collective, as sharing one another's space, and so not endangering that space. And so that is part of conflict resolution, and it can be part of peace building.
Yes. Thank you for your comments, sirs. And if I could respond, you know, I think with I come from Myanmar, you know, quite. And as you're speaking, I can also hear parallels in my own country. You speak on the concept of collectivism. That is something that is also, let me say, the backbone of our country is this idea of we help each other. The needs of the many supersede the wants of the few. But I think we are still in the midst of grappling with historical trauma, sir. Both because of conflict that is ongoing, but also conflict from our past. When we look at colonialism in Myanmar, we are still trying to process our losses. And I think most tragically, we have lost our sense of imagination. You know? So when as I'm hearing your presentation and trying to absorb this information and thinking how I can apply it to my own country, I wonder, in your view, what is the starting point? You know, we are at the UN Global Forum, but even in my own country, there is still quite a lot of caution around the UN. Not my own personal view, but many of the comments towards the UN from my own peers is with a lot of caution towards the agency because of fears of interventionism, of not truly understanding the nuance of our situation. So if the UN is not the starting point, and if the government is also an agency that has historically been the oppressor, who is the starting point? Is it the community activists? Is it women? Is it youth? Who can we say is the spark for us to get to a point where we can have more of these community-led governance, as you are speaking on, as examples from your own country? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, given that we need to identify, you know, drivers, you know, for this kind of community governance movement. Like you said, it's going to be a potpourri of different kind of actors. The activists, there are also, you know, people in government who also sympathize with the plight of the ordinary people. You just had a legislator in Nigeria who made a very positive contribution So we have constituencies, cross-cutting constituencies that we can mobilize, but the citizen is very important. And if you check what happened in the Arab Spring, in Tunisia, for example, you will see that every citizen is a potential, driver of positive change. And so it is not going to be like identifying just a few. So as this movement goes on, what we're saying essentially is that if the UN can buy into this, because the UN is the most influential multilateral actor, because of engaging with states. If you take Africa, for instance, we are concerned, and the president of my country, President Muhammadu Buhari, just said it last week at the ECOWAS summit, talking to his colleagues not to amend the constitution and extend their constitutional tenure of office. So these are the kinds of positive things that you can see. You can find in leaders across the world. You can also find in the list of the citizens. So that the UN is contribution for us to make progress in trying to mobilize community leadership for good governance and for peace building and security. So it's going to involve a lot of actors.
Yes, and in addition to that, you need a strong civil society. We need to build very strong civil society. And in order to do that, you need an international community, the UNDP, and so many other agencies that can promote civil society at the community level. You have community-based organizations that need to be strengthened, that need to be supported, and then together they can begin to craft structures that will put together all the strata of the community in order to be self-actualizing. They must first self-actualize themselves in form of strengthening through civil society. And in this civil society, you can have women, you can have youth, you can have professionals, all coming together within the community to be able to address a lot of these challenges. And in so doing, they'll be building their capacity to govern at the local level. They will have community developers who will generate ideas on what they want. As a matter of fact, as soon as they are strong enough, political parties will have to consult them, governments will have to consult them, leaders will have to consult them, because they have consolidated their base at the community level, and therefore will be able to strengthen their position in terms of what they need and their economic requirements and needs.
Hello, so we have another panelist that would like to talk. If we could let Honorable Muhammad Bago join us, feel free to turn on your video and your mic. Yeah, perfect. We can see you and hear you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, feel free to ask your question or your comment whenever you're ready.
Honorable, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Cornel. The topic is very interesting, and I think it's high time we start looking into community-driven policies so as to get a sustainable peace and in our democracy. All the issues around issues of the youth, women, the SDGs issues are all centered around communities and the challenges in communities. And you see how we have been created and provided for is that we have not captured from our constitution and any other policy of government. There is no deliberate attempt to carry the community down up. So this topic is very, very timely, and I think there is no better time to discuss it. The UN 75 has got a very important topic, and the SCDDD has also done a very wonderful job. And behalf of myself and my committee of the House of Representatives, we have keyed into this agenda and we're going to promote it very well. That is one. Secondly, when you talk about the only thing that is a challenge to us is that how do you organize people at community level? Organization of people at community level is the major challenge. You must come with a nomenclature to have leadership at different levels. Is it youth leader? Is it a woman leader? Is it a clan leader? Community leader? Those kind of issues must be addressed because you cannot just say you want to go to the community, you want to have a community-driven project or policies driven by community without addressing who handles what and who takes responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. It's good to hear that your major concern is how do you organize people at the community level. I think it's a science of its own. You have to have the trust of the people to be able to influence them, to be able to organize them. Now, if you go to a community, and I must say that we have done a lot of this in different communities. If you go to a community and do what is called needs assessment of the community, it is that community that will tell you what their priorities are. And they start with those priorities. It is that community that will tell you who their leaders are. And those leaders will naturally emerge. So once the leaders emerge, their priorities from the needs assessment, are assembled, you are good to go. You have a monitoring, system that will check whether they are deviating from their initial, program. And this will be discussed among them. Participatory, development. Once that happens, you will not have a situation where, as happened in one place that I know that I worked previously, where a borehole was sited and the borehole was boycotted by the women, even though they sourced their water from a stream. The borehole was put in the center of the village and they boycotted it. Why? Because they were not consulted and that was not their priority. In fact, they said going to the stream met their other needs, which having a borehole in the center of the village, will have disrupted. And so that is why it is important, to do participatory development so that the people get involved in choosing the projects that they want. And I must say that, of course, in my environment, that what we call community development constituency projects, I know that, the assembly doesn't go to the people and say, what do you need? And so imposing some things on them. We have seen those kinds of things, So we need to, if we want to carry the people along, to begin to, work with them from the beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
Hello? Okay. Just to add one more point, and that's that most communities now have unions. You have town unions, you have artisan unions, and you have all these. So their leadership is already existing through those unions here and there. Vehicle drivers union, butchers union, farmers union, all of them have their leaders. And once you are able to put them together, you'll be able to arrive at leadership as well as decision making along that process. I'm afraid.
Yeah, I just want to take summary of what would like the UN, the kind of intervention.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. We would like to probably by way of conclusion to say that some of the interventions within the UN can make is helping engaging states, to minimize top-down over-centralization of power and initiatives, and empower local participants with information and skills, and build from bottom to the top. The states will be better for it. Work with states to provide legitimacy for peace management organizations in UN member states. establish a statutory inventory of peace management organizations in member states, because peace is the main issue. Create a special ECOSOC representation for peace management organizations across continents. This is possible. Develop mechanisms for cooperation among existing peace management organizations and provide funding for capacity building for peace management organizations in infrastructure for peace and cooperative problem solving that will transform conflict. Finally, support UN member states to establish result-based monitoring and evaluation metrics for peace and security at community levels. Once we have these kinds of things, it is possible that communities will become more empowered and governance will be better. There will be more security.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the summary. I, as the moderator, have put down some of the issues that have arisen, and I will just try to use some few minutes to wrap up. We just have about 10-15 minutes left at the time, and I will use about 5 minutes to quickly read out what I think has emerged from our discussion. We are talking about community peace. Sorry, Honorable, are you trying to say something?
Yes. When you were responding to my comment, you made very important points very clear. For instance, when constituency projects are taken to communities and they have community leaders, that does not stop those things from being vandalized or utilized. In the hole was sunk in a community where they boycotted the use of the borehole for probably some obvious reasons. That is why I'm saying that it will be very important than to leave it on a random way of selection. That if they have decided that the leadership of the community was going to come from a direction, that direction should be captured in policy making. So that when those things are provided, the leadership can be held responsible, they can be held accountable. That is one. Secondly, capacity building, infrastructure development, and advancement of a people that is driven from a community-based argument has always proven to be very, very easy. But continuity becomes an issue because it becomes nobody's responsibility. And that is just my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Earlier we mentioned social auditing, which simply refers to monitoring government projects by the community. I believe that the legislature has a lot of work to do in entrenching and legitimizing this question of social auditing. It's an area of dialogue that will continue to have between the legislature and the policy makers and think tanks like Savannah Center to be able to promote the idea of social auditing and that to capture all these fears and the concerns that have been expressed in this forum. I want to thank everyone for the participation. I just want to remind us about what has transpired in the last 1 hour. The UN 75 African Dialogue. This session actually concentrated on the question of community peace as foundation for security. And 2 presenters advocated for a post-UN 75 which promotes community ownership of peace building and security provisioning so as to nurture empowered, resilient, and peaceable and secure communities. The first speaker argues for a people-driven peace and security through a bottom-top approach. The presenter opined that community peace and security can be mirrored through the Ubuntu philosophy, which was the former form of peace and security in African social societies before a state-centric peace and security. The speaker suggests that the UN can learn from ECOWAS, which began transitioning to an ECOWAS of the people through its conflict prevention framework to curtail state centrism Hence, the UN can innovate from experience-induced learning in Africa and elsewhere in the world. The speaker advocates for a post-UN 75 peace and security interventions, which should be mediated through experience of context, history, and culture, but peculiarities as no one size fits all. The African peculiarities are anchored on traditional African belief systems, according to which communal, social good, just as security is a function of the unity and solidarity of peace and community as encapsulated in the notion of Ubuntu. To violate the other means violating oneself. It refers to as Ubuntu. So the first speaker actually suggested that the UN should remain the guarantor of democracy, who empower local communities by strengthening of democracy and supporting grassroots communities to own and promote peace building and security in their localities. The presenter calls for the promotion of communal ownership of peace building, the prevention of conflict by removing its underlying causes, and communication in social relations to help forestall conditions that trigger conflict and insecurity. The second speaker focuses on community security, especially internal conflicts and confrontations within states as emerged as a new global challenge after the Cold War. He observes that the UN has shown the way through the UNDP program, 7 pillars of security, but no one will eventually achieve such goals. The second speaker identifies UNDP 7 pillars, which include political security, personal security, community security, economic, social, food, environmental. He argues that all these values are relevant in the communities, and the UN should devise a means of ensuring that security at the community level is founded on global security. He also goes on to say that community-based governance should include a network of community-structured governance holding hands across the globe in learning experience, in commonality of practices, and collective problem solving. All-inclusive security architecture, where community and cultural and civil communities are brought together. A community-based governance structure where all segments of the society are already brought in and involved. The speaker suggests that the mandate of the UNDP should be strengthened to promote local communities so that non-state actors forum can be globalized in a network mechanism such that annually you can have annual general conference of local communities that would come at the Secretary General's level and to become a very, very entrenched method of community-based security peace architecture that will be cascaded, scaled up to the United Nations level. Of course, a lot of participants contributed to this discussion, and the summary of some of the participants' contribution is the distribution of power to communities rather than individual, particularly youth and women, through the pressure of civil society and civil engagement in governance, and ensuring that community peace and security through development and community dialogue. And most importantly, the question of leadership at the community level. How do you ensure proper leadership at the community level? These are some of the challenges that will evolve where community governance comes in, and in doing so, a lot of trust will be again. The question of trust building was also very, very crucial in this discussion. Participants were of the view that in spite of all the lofty ideas, where there is no trust, all these cannot emanate. Therefore, there must be a way of building trust even among communities in order to ensure that this community peace and the security as a foundation for world peace can be entrenched. Trust is very crucial, and it must be part of the necessary issues that must be addressed when we talk about community peace and security. I want to thank you very much on this note for your wonderful participation. I want to thank all the contributors, particularly the lead speaker, Professor Oshita, and then my humble self who did the second presentation. I want to thank the executive director who hosted this session. In closing up, I will once more invite him to round up to close this session. I want to thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. I'm very glad that at the end of my welcome speech, I asked you to be attentive and also contribute liberally. I'm happy that your contributions have emanated into the document that we have and are going to circulate. The one issue I just want to ask, I want to raise is the issue of integrity. You can have trust if there's integrity in whatever you do, whether it is the government level or community level. Those responsible for driving the process must ensure that they have integrity in whatever they do. If there's no integrity in their actions and their utterances, definitely they will never get the trust of the people. It's very, very important that you have integrity in whatever you do. So we will promote, I will ask that one of the issues to be promoted or to be hammered on is issue of integrity on the people who are entrusted with the leadership of running the process. I want to thank Professor Oshita, Colonel Lawal, and the staff of the Savannah Center who have given us the support and new participants, and the UN 75 Global Governance Forum for giving us the opportunity to host this all-important session. And thank you very much and happy UN 75.
Thank you very much. That ends this session.